So let's talk about the statute of limitations because I see that there's always a lot of confusion with this issue. So I want to make some things clear. First place, the statute of limitations is a time frame. Any lawsuit, really, everything has a statute of limitations except murder. But lawsuits, civil lawsuits, medical malpractice, legal malpractice, whatever you can think of, there's going to be a statute of limitations. That means a lawsuit has to be filed within that time period. So the standard, and I say standard, it varies obviously from one state to the next. I forgot. Well, I just forgot. I think Delaware maybe had an 8 or 10 year, maybe 10-year statute of limitation on credit card debt and debts like that, which is insanely high. But the average I want to say is 4, 5, 6 years. Now it depends if it's a verbal one. How's it verbal? Well, you call up the bank, hey, just I want this done, and usually, the signed agreement may not happen. Typically, that might happen with a credit card. Normally, they'll just email you everything, so chances are it's written. But it might increase if it's written. So 4 or 5 years, let's say. Now, what that means is, let's say I stop making payments today, then just add whatever the statute of limitations is. Let's say it's 4 years or whatever. Then if it's past that date, you cannot file a lawsuit. Now, can creditors call you? Yep. Can they file a lawsuit on you? Yep. But I just said the statute of limitations has passed. It doesn't matter. See, you would have to tell the creditor, this debt's not collectible. So, leave me alone. Screw off. Get out of here. We're done. You had all this time to sue me and you did not. Can they file a lawsuit? Because that seems contradictory. Yeah. But here's the thing, filing the lawsuit doesn't mean that it can't be dismissed. So you would have to file a motion to dismiss, argue that before the judge in order to get the case dismissed. The judge isn't going to make that argument for you. So a lot of times people are like, well, why didn't the judge do it? Because the judge isn't practicing law. He's interpreting the law, enforcing the law. So you have to file a motion to dismiss if it's after that fact. Now, a lot of times I simply tell clients left hand, right hand, nobody knows what they're doing. And so that's why these lawsuits may get filed or they continue to harass you. But you just got to tell them we're past the statute of limitations. What is it? The Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. So bye-bye. Don't bother me anymore. We're done with this. But now there are situations, and this is where it gets a little complicated. Not complicated, but where you kind of, they're playing tricks, is for lack of a better word, where a creditor will say, okay, well, I'll tell you what, you're right. We'll stop contacting you. I'll do this as a favor. I will go back to my bosses and tell them no more phone calls for a few months until you get organized financially. Just make a payment in good faith. Now, I don't care what that payment is. Let's say they start at 200, 500, 100, you get it down to $20. And you say, you know what, for $20, it's not worth it for this person to keep harassing me. Well, guess what you just did? You just added 4 years to the statute of limitations or whatever it is. So that is something they're not going to tell you because they're not representing your interest. So you can't make payments. You got to ask them, provide me proof that you own the debt. I want to know when those payments were made, when the last payment was made, and take it from there. Now, these shady fly-by-night debt collectors will tell you, we don't have to provide you anything. Then I don't have to talk to you. You hang up the phone and that's it. Tell them you're going to sue them under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act because they probably realize we're not on the winning end of this argument. So let's just act huff and puff and act tough, and maybe the person will collapse and make a payment. The answer is no. We're going to sue you. Okay. You know what happens in the lawsuit? They have to provide proof of the debt. They have to prove that they bought the debt. They have to prove when the last payments were made because the statute of limitations is a defense on your end. So if you don't want to give that information today, that's okay. I'll get it tomorrow in the lawsuit. No big deal. And then I'll get the case dismissed then. So you got to be careful that there's no payments made throughout this time period where the statute of limitations has already expired. Now, one more thing I want to focus on, and that is judgments. A judgment is separate from the statute of limitation issues. Statute of limitation is get the ball rolling. I have to file a lawsuit during this time period. The judgment means they already won the case. Whether you filed an answer and you lost the case anyway, or they got a default because no response was filed, they have this judgment now that they can collect. How does that apply to the statute of limitations? It really doesn't. The standard in most states is a judgment lasts for 20 years. So when people say, well, I'm way past the statute of limitations, this debt is from 2015. Yeah, but they sued you between 2015 and 2019, and now they have this judgment. Add 10 more years to it, and we're in 2025, so they're still within that time frame. Guess what? They can renew a judgment as well. So they can add a few more years to it. Normally, like, it renews every year after that. So for 20 years, you've got this thing hanging over you, and they can't collect. They can't file a lawsuit to put liens on your assets, garnish your wages, etc. So don't confuse the judgment with the statute of limitations, because they are two separate issues. And if a judgment was issued, a lot of times what clients tell me is, I don't remember this. Even if it was 4 years ago, let's say it's one of these judgments been hanging around. I had that happen to a client of mine who wanted to file for bankruptcy. The debt went from like nothing to 20 grand. And I was like, you make more than $100,000 a year, you can forget bankruptcy. It's not worth it. You're going to have to pay this off. She was in college. She stopped paying, and those were the consequences. But the issue is this judgment now. How do we get to the judgment? Well, remember, a lawsuit starts with you have to serve the other person. A lot of times clients say, and they're not lying, they're saying, I was never served. It's like, I know this is hard, but go back 10 years. Are you sure? I wasn't served. Then they look at the address, especially if it was a rental, and they say, I wasn't living there when that happened. I never got the, like I said, I never got the lawsuit. See, that's the problem. A lot of time process servers who don't do their job correctly say, hey, how you doing? I'm here. This is a lawsuit for Bob. And you're like, Bob don't live here. He goes, well, just don't worry about it. There's the lawsuit. Service was made. I like when, because that's what my process server does, is you get the paperwork, sign off on it, ID, etc. Now process servers even take photos to prove that that's the individual. That's the way it should be done. There are plenty of process servers. I've heard the stories where they leave it on the front porch. I had one person tell me, and I saw it on a Ring security camera. It shows you what a moron this process server was. I go, hey, file a complaint. Maybe he'll lose his license. The person didn't want to open the door. And so he says, you've been served. And the guy's like, I haven't been served yet. You just left it at the door. This is all communicating through the window, or maybe the Ring camera. But I did see when he got the paperwork and just threw it out of the window of his car, and the client went and picked it up like next door down, and this process server was claiming he was served. Now, of course, a case like that, I can get dismissed and everything else. But the bigger issue is, make sure. I even had one situation years ago with child support. So the arrears were astronomical. This person didn't know he had a child, but it was his roommate who hated him, who pretended he was him, and he got served and held on to the paperwork. A default was entered, and then you have all those arrears. How did I prove it? I had to bring in the process server. I was able to find that guy and get proof, cross-examination, etc., that they were not one and the same person. So if you were sued and you're thinking it wasn't me, then you got to go back to the clerk of court's office. If you don't live there, hopefully you can get that information on their website and look for what typically is called the return of service. The return of service is the process server, hopefully it's a sheriff's office because they're going to be more legit, says, I served Bob's wife and I got identification. So at that point, there's nothing you can do because a household member received it. But if it's one of these situations you moved out and the guy's like, okay, that ain't me, but whatever. I mean, I got served once for a lawsuit that wasn't me. It was another guy with my name in Miami. How common is Alex Hernandez? I told the guy, I'm not accepting this. He kept being belligerent, this process server. So I immediately sent it back to the law firm. I said, it's not me. And I even filed, wasting time, but I'm like, I don't want this poor guy to get screwed. I even filed with the court saying they served the wrong guy. And I just filed my motion and left it at that, let them go do what they had to do. But most people won't do that. Obviously, especially if you're not a lawyer, they just take the paperwork, throw it away. They read it. Oh, this is interesting. This guy is getting sued. They throw it away. And now it looks like the person got served, no response was filed, and they get a default on you. So if you are in that situation, go back in time to the clerk's office, look at the return of service, and find out who they claim is being served. And of course, you have proof that you don't live there anymore. So you can file a motion for lack of proper service and say, I never got served. The resident of that new resident there got served. Or if necessary, bring in a process server to testify and explain, how they hand it out. Did they hand it to someone? Probably not if they didn't get the initials. So keep that in mind. Separate statute of limitations when the lawsuit can be filed. Understand that you can extend the statute limit, you can waive it if you want. It could be extended by making payments. And even if the case gets filed, make sure that you file the motion to dismiss, because if it's past the statute of limitations, in that case. But what they're hoping is you don't do that and they get a judgment anyway, and they can't legally. So keep that in mind. And finally, be careful with the judgments. All right. Any questions or comments, feel free to post them in the comment section below. I will have a link to the original article on this in case you want to, in case you prefer to read the article, and you can listen to it in audio as well and podcast. All right. Take care, everybody. Good luck. Be informed. Be prepared. Start your debt-free journey.